Now, members, please, we're in a position to resume at item number 9, motion regarding confidence in the Taoiseach and Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment. This debate will conclude within 110 minutes. And I firstly call on Taoiseach Deputy Micheál Martin to move the motion. Taoiseach, you have 15 minutes.
I propose the motion at Ceann Comhairle that Dáil Éireann has confidence in the Taoiseach and Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, Leo Varadkar TD. The decision by Sinn Féin to table a motion of confidence in the Taoiseach was based on that party's hope that something would turn up that would help them use today for an aggressive political attack on the government. It was a 100% cynical move, and unfortunately it reflects the reality of its 4 months as the largest opposition party. They've been left scrambling by the reality that nothing significant has changed since last week's 2-hour session. Let no one be in any doubt, the situation relating to how the nearly completed contract for general practitioners was given to a doctors' organisation is a legitimate point of public concern. It occurred during the last government, but it is a matter which this government and Dáil has the right to ask questions about. As I've said repeatedly, it was inappropriate and it should not have happened. When the Taoiseach informed me of the issue, he outlined the details of what happened, and these details have remained consistent subsequently. He also accepted without any issue that political accountability required that he come before Dáil Éireann and answer detailed questions at length. In substance, no one has demonstrated any personal gain from how the document was distributed, and public policy was not adversely impacted. The Taoiseach has acknowledged his error, and all details have been published. Lessons have been learned all round, and ministers realise that such situations should not occur during this government. In recent days, Sinn Féin representatives were busy telling anyone who would listen that today's debate would be preceded by some blockbuster revelations that would justify the tabling of the no-confidence motion. This, of course, hasn't happened. In fact, there is mounting evidence that we should be very wary of placing weight on claims made in texts between third parties. The Dáil has exercised its political oversight of this case, and there has been accountability. A number of deputies have referred matters to regulatory and legal authorities, clearly more in hope than expectation that their legal assertions are backed up. That is their right, and the independent structures involved will carry out their work. It is a tiresome part of debates such as this that attacks are thrown at other parties and deputies as being somehow complicit or lacking independence. The fact is that Ireland has a multi-party system. Everybody who actually wants to achieve progress for the Irish people has to be willing to work closely and constructively with others. I profoundly reject the idea of putting partisan manoeuvring into every issue. Sinn Féin is entitled to practice the politics of always looking for an angle and both participating in and attacking a government at the same time. I and my party simply don't agree. Quite frankly, I have no interest in playing the politics as usual, which Sinn Féin is committed to. I see no purpose in using my time in this debate to address the ever-rising examples of Sinn Féin ignoring basic ethical standards. True republicanism is about working in the interests of all of the people. And my absolute focus is showing the Irish people that their government is working for them. At the moment, our country is, with others, going through a dramatic social, economic and public health shock, which is unprecedented in the modern world. I am happy to propose a motion of confidence in the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, who is part of a coalition government which is implementing an urgent and progressive programme to help and work with all sections of our society. Tackling the pandemic remains our first priority, and the House will note that this morning's report from the European Centre for Disease Control states that Ireland now has the third lowest incidence in the European Union. We still have more progress to achieve if we are to limit the virus's impact in the time before a vaccine is approved, manufactured and distributed. But there is no doubt that the measures put in place by the government are helping Ireland get through the pandemic's second wave. Every minister and every part of government has been working tirelessly to respond with action to address new issues as they have emerged. Within weeks of taking up office, we prepared and implemented a job stimulus programme to protect jobs and businesses, support our schools in reopening and respond to the urgent needs of many sectors. The budget, which we introduced last month, goes further and puts in place a comprehensive range of actions to support the hardest hit sectors like hospitality and culture, and is, according to every independent review, highly progressive. People and communities whose needs are the greatest are receiving the biggest benefit of the budget. The left and the far left in this House refuse to acknowledge it, but this is a simple fact and is backed up by all independent research. Even with the priority we must give to the pandemic, in only 4 months we have begun moving forward with a major programme of change and investment. Ministers are participating in a range of cabinet committees which are delivering an unprecedented period of policy review and development. In health, on top of resources for responding to COVID, next year will see an entirely new level of activity to deliver fast and sustained progress. Action on cancer, maternity and trauma care, a new public-only contract, 1,200 acute hospital beds. Major advances in mental health services, access to diagnostics and access to new medicines. This is not small incremental change, it is substantive progress after only a few months. In education, the Minister and our officials have, together with the partners in education, have succeeded in overcoming a series of major policy and logistical challenges and are now moving ahead to implement longer-term action. A lower pupil-teacher ratio, a significant expansion of special education supports, and a new push for inclusive schools. These and many other actions are at the heart of our work on education. And of course, we continue to give a priority to helping to protect as many jobs as possible and secure a comprehensive and inclusive recovery. The Government has introduced a comprehensive range of measures to support businesses of all sizes, and in particular the small and medium-sized businesses which are bearing the biggest impact. The Taoiseach has played a central role in delivering these initiatives and continues to consult proactively with many stakeholders across business to help retain and create jobs. We have continued intensive work to secure and maintain high-valued inward investment. As part of this, I have held a range of meetings with key employers and potential new investors. The announcement we made last week with Pfizer of 300 new jobs confirmed that this Government is succeeding in showing that Ireland is a place to invest and to grow. And the establishment of the Department of Higher Education and Research was a further example of this, and a signal to the inward investment community that Ireland is serious about investment in fourth level and in research. On housing, a new area of sustained support for social housing has begun. We also begun action on the existential threat of climate change. Strong new legislation has been published. It's going through the House, and a wide series of initiatives on energy, biodiversity and sustainability are underway. At European level, we've continued our intense engagement with our partners concerning the critical Brexit negotiations, and we played a constructive role in securing agreement on the breakthrough new European Union funding mechanisms. And in terms of the future of this island, North-South interaction at ministerial level has been restored and is moving forward in a new spirit of cooperation. The new Shared Ireland initiative is underway, built on the core principle of fulfilling the vision of the Good Friday Agreement and creating a new era of cooperation, understanding and contact between communities north and south. The £500 million fund created to support the initiative marks the largest sustained investment in this area and will benefit some of our most marginalised communities. I am very pleased with the work which this new Government has undertaken in only 4 months in office. The three parties which formed the Government have different views on many things, but we have agreed to work together in the interests of the Irish people, and this is what we are doing. At this critical moment in our country's history, we are focused on action, not politics. We are working with the Irish people to get through this pandemic, to build an inclusive recovery and to deliver sustained progress on critical social, economic and environmental issues. And that is why I and my party will vote confidence in the Taoiseach and in this Government this evening. Am I sharing time?
Simon Coveney, sharing with
Thank you, Councillor.
Minister Heather Humphreys.
I want to take this opportunity to speak to express confidence in the Taoiseach. Leo Varadkar has been a colleague of mine for many years, and he's a person I've grown to know well and trust. We're here today because of a Sinn Féin attempt to continue to sow division within government and capitalise on a mistake made by the Taoiseach. As became clear last week, Leo's motivation in bringing the NAGP into the fold on a new GP contract was well-meaning, but it did take a shortcut. He should not have mailed the document to the NAGP President. He should instead have had them briefed officially. The Taoiseach has apologised for this and has said that it was wrong and not best practice. However, if you were to read the abuse that faceless online trolls and their backers have drummed up, you would be forgiven for thinking the Taoiseach had acted for personal gain or to sabotage something, instead of landing widespread support for a deal done with GPs that he cared about. The Taoiseach has already been before this House to explain himself thoroughly and to take questions. It is obvious now that for some, what is ongoing is not about establishing facts or truth, but about sustaining a political smear campaign masquerading as whistleblowing to inflict maximum political damage. Let's talk about whistleblowers. In 2014, as Garda Sergeant Maurice McCabe's reputation stood in tatters and as he was labelled as disgusting by his superior, who was it in this House who stood out from the crowd and said, no, the actions of Maurice McCabe are not disgusting but distinguished? The Charlton Tribunal said, that remark came from a brave politician, a member of Cabinet, a senior individual within the political system, and it was a break for Maurice McCabe that someone of that stature was brave enough to come out and call it as it was. That is the Leo Varadkar that I know. The timeline of April 2019 shows the truth and the context for those who want to see it on this issue. The contracts were negotiated and done. The detail was widely briefed to the media by the IMO, the HSE and the government. The Cabinet was updated, and hundreds of GPs were meeting in organised meetings around the country discussing the detail with briefing documents from the IMO. And only then did the Taoiseach give the document to the NAGP in an effort to try to bring GPs together. So, Ceann Comhairle, last week was about accountability to this House, and rightly so. But what is Sinn Féin's game here this evening? Are they using this issue to try to sow division in a coalition during a global pandemic and as Brexit negotiations reach endgame? Or is Sinn Féin's strategy simply to harvest and nurture online hate and bile regardless of the truth and cost? The politics of division and resentment. I'll let those listening to the benches opposite judge for themselves, but I have no hesitation in voting confidence in Leo Varadkar.
Thank you, Minister Humphreys.
Ceann Comhairle. I have no hesitation in standing before the House this evening to express my full confidence in Taoiseach Leo Varadkar. I do stand here, however, feeling a deep sense of dismay. 2020 has been one of the most difficult years for this country, a year that has seen almost 2,000 people lose their lives as a result of COVID, a year that has seen families right across this country suffer from unthinkable heartache and grief. And yet, with all the challenges that this country faces, there is one party in this chamber who are more interested in cheap political stunts than the very people they claim to represent. But should we be in any way surprised at the actions of Sinn Féin? We are, after all, dealing with the party of multiple mysterious bank accounts, the party that denigrates victims, the party that operates under a toxic culture of secrecy, bullying and intimidation, and most of all, the party of rank hypocrisy. With Sinn Féin, it's always a case of do as we say, not as we do. Your pontificate about a golden circle, where Sinn Féin is the richest party in this country. You even had Donald Trump himself at one of your gold-plated dinners in America. You had the gall to accuse this government of burying records, when victims of the IRA across this country are still buried and their families are still waiting the truth from Sinn Féin. Talk to Breach Quinn, talk to Austin Stack, talk to the family of Columba McVeigh or Tom Oliver. They'll tell you what Sinn Féin's truth is about. You criticise this government's response to COVID on a daily basis, when in Northern Ireland, where you are in power, people are struggling with one of the highest rates of the virus in Europe. You talk about honesty and integrity, when you had tens of thousands of pounds of COVID support money that was meant for small businesses lodged into Sinn Féin accounts. And then, when you were found out, you came up with the Father Ted excuse. The money was just resting in your account. You claim to be a 32-county party, except, of course, when it comes to political donations. Sinn Féin come into this House, you throw lots of mud about in the hope that some of it sticks. That's your modus operandi as a party. You have introduced a Trump-like nastiness to Irish political discourse. And then, when somebody speaks out, your social media army mobilises. Whether it's a politician, a journalist or a member of the public, they're all subjected to vile abuse. Thankfully, there is a silent majority out there who see through Sinn Féin, and they'll see tonight for what it is, a stunt which is about political opportunism rather than the national interest. But there's one politician who knows the meaning of the national interest, and that's Leo Varadkar. When our country faced some of its darkest hours this year, Leo Varadkar was there. He led from the start and he led from the front. And when it came to forming a government, unlike Sinn Féin, he didn't shirk his responsibility either. And that's because Leo Varadkar puts the national interest before party interest, something Sinn Féin can't even comprehend.
Thank you very much.
Your actions tonight once again prove that to be the case.
Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald, please. Deputy MacDonald, you have 10 minutes.
Gurmai gut cean córa agus beg mé cainte gwine an ruúin seo. Níl muín agin Leo Varadkar, bhris sé na rialcha, agus is gódó bheith freagach as sin. This government, Ceann Comhairle, has been in office for just 4 months. And in that short period, we have witnessed displays of incompetence and chaos of record proportions. This government was born of necessity. The old guard came together to keep change out, to hold back the tides of progress and to hold on to business as usual. When he was Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar leaked a confidential draft contract to a third party, to his friend. And the refusal of the current Taoiseach to hold the Taoiseach and leader of Fine Gael to account left a no-confidence motion as the only sanction available to us as an opposition. Predictably, government responds with accusations, with name-calling and with spin, and that's their choice. That's their business. But no amount of insults, of innuendo or mudslinging by Fine Gael can alter the facts. And the facts of what happened are not in dispute. Leo Varadkar, while he was Taoiseach, leaked confidential government information to his friend. He can offer no credible reason for his actions. His claim that he was acting in the interests of the taxpayer or that the information was already in the public domain are threadbare. Those defences collapsed on the floor of the Dáil last week. The truth is, there is no acceptable reason for what happened. This wasn't incompetence, it wasn't a mistake. This was a conscious decision by Leo Varadkar to leak inside information to his friend, and now the current Taoiseach stands idly by. And Micheál Martin's failure to act is a failure of leadership. The government claims that expressing no confidence in the Taoiseach is disproportionate to the conduct of Leo Varadkar, but here's the truth. The truth is that if a junior civil servant or any departmental official leaked a confidential document, they would be sacked. End of story. And when Leo Varadkar leaked this document, he was the Taoiseach. He was the head of government. And that position comes with the highest level of responsibility, with the greatest need for ethical and honest conduct, and therefore it comes with a greater demand for accountability. What angers ordinary people is that the Fine Gael leader's actions are par for the course, part of the insider cosy club politics that has done so much damage to our country. This is a broken politics, one that Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil want people to believe has been left behind. But the politics of the cosy club really never went away at all. Favours for friends, connections to pals in the world of high finance, access to power through a simple text message. While Debenhams workers, survivors of mother and baby homes are frozen out, fighting to have their voices heard. This is a very Fine Gael thing. Government argue that Deputy Varadkar's behaviour was a technical or procedural error, not best practice, they called it. They say it bears no relevance to the bread and butter issues facing ordinary people, but how very wrong they are. The Fine Gael cosy club culture is very relevant to the bread and butter reality of people's lives because it's about access to power. It's about what decisions are made and in whose interests. In the interests of ordinary people or vested interests, ministers, friends and personal contacts. As we debate this motion this evening, workers and families are struggling. Many are coping with the loss of life, the loss of livelihoods as a result of a once-in-a-century pandemic. They also face the uncertainty of Brexit, and we're coming to the end of what has been an extraordinarily difficult year for our people. And our people are entitled to much better from government than those in power playing by the rulebook of the old boys network. The cosy club insider culture that dominates Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil too is why those parties fail workers and families again and again. It's the reason why governments come and governments go, but nothing really changes for ordinary people. Count Corla, I could stand here and delve into Fine Gael's past episodes with corruption and insider connections. I could list the scandals, the tribunals, the abuses of power, and it would take me all night. And it would get us nowhere. Because this isn't about the past. This is very much about how government is run today. And here's what I know for sure. As long as housing policy in this state is designed for developers and landlords, we will never fix the housing crisis. As long as health policy is driven by profit and privatisation, then we will never have a strong public health service. And as long as economic decisions are made to favour the golden circle, then we will never have a fair economy that delivers for workers and families. The truth is that for so long as this rotten insider culture is tolerated, nothing will ever change. Houses will remain unaffordable, rents will keep going up and up. A generation will have to settle for the box room in their parents' house as a home for themselves and their own families. Our health system will continue to struggle with overcrowded hospitals, citizens on trolleys, children left years waiting, sometimes in agony, for treatment and for care. That, Count Corla, is the price of government for the privileged few at the expense of the many. It's a price that generations have paid, and it has cost us dearly, and it can no longer be tolerated. It's the politics where Fine Gael's Brian Hayes moves seamlessly from government to chief lobbyist for the banks, and then sits across the table from his Fine Gael friends in government when denying mortgage holders breaks for their mortgage. It's the politics where Fine Gael's Michael Darcy, having failed miserably to rein in the insurance industry and their crippling premiums, moves from the Department of Finance to the world of high finance. The people that we represent demand change. It's as simple as that. They look for a future of fairness, of kindness, but above all of equality. They look for the possibility of better politics, where we can finally begin to realise the Ireland of the proclamation and the vision of our better angels. A real republic that prioritises ordinary citizens and upholds the principle of good, honest government. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael clubbed together to deny that change. And people now see these parties who desperately cling to the past back doing what you do best, looking after the well-connected and the well-off, while ordinary people are left behind. It is lamentable that the Green Party, in whom so many placed hope for change, have remained so quiet in all of this. Their silence speaks volumes. After 4 months in power, this coalition has been riven with scandal. Leo Varadkar's actions have undermined politics, they've undermined the government, and they've undermined the state. Sinn Féin said that the old ways would not be tolerated on our watch in opposition, and we will be held to that commitment. We now are calling time on the politics of the cosy club. Former Taoiseach serving Taoiseach Leo Varadkar has asked for a fool's pardon. Deputy Varadkar is no fool, and the people will not be fooled by the bluster and bravado of bullish government members whose sole concern is self-preservation. This scandalous behaviour that we have discovered, by the way, cannot be solved by ministers simply picking their friends more carefully. Ceann Comhairle, Leo Varadkar, when Taoiseach, leaked a confidential document to a friend. He was caught, and now he must be held accountable.
Thank you, Deputy MacDonald. We move now to the Labour Party. Deputy Aodhán Ó Ríordáin.
Ceann Comhairle, the government are asking us to vote confidence in the Taoiseach and Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment. The government are asking us to accept his explanation for his behaviour in leaking a confidential document to a friend and head of a rival representative body completely outside of normal procedure and appropriate practice during a multi-million euro negotiation process. The Labour Party told the Taoiseach to come clean, to tell the truth, to dispense with the incredible yarn he had been peddling, to apologise, and that perhaps there may have been a way out for him. But the Taoiseach chose not to do that. He persisted with the line that he was leaking the document for the good of the document, a statement that takes the entire country for fools. And then his cheerleaders go onto public airwaves and repeat the same lines. One minister even suggested that the word confidential was printed on the document for the benefit of Dr. O'Toole. The question is not only should the Dáil have confidence in him, but should any trade union have confidence that they can negotiate with this government in good faith? Or should any minister have confidence that they can share a confidential document with the Taoiseach in good faith? The fact is, in all honesty, they can't. We also have no confidence in the minister because he has shown no interest in protecting the rights of workers throughout this pandemic. When sectoral pay agreements were struck down by the High Court, my colleague Jed Nash introduced emergency legislation to reinstate them. The Taoiseach dismissed this move as virtue signalling. When the Labour Party introduced our statutory sick pay bill, the Taoiseach and his government colleagues kicked it down the road for 6 months. When ICTU walked out of the Low Pay Commission after they advocated for a paltry 10-cent increase in the minimum wage, the Taoiseach accepted the increase without question. The same week, he humiliated a public official and NEFIT on national television and dismissed their recommendation because they hadn't thought things through. The Debenham workers and others have been screaming for the implementation of the Duffy-Cahill report, which he is clearly indifferent to. And we are quite sure that the bill we launch today on working from home and the right to switch off will be treated with similar disdain by the same minister. So we have no confidence in the Taoiseach. He is not a friend of the worker and now appears not to be a friend of transparent politics. The Labour Party have spent generations championing ethics in public life. From freedom of information legislation to lobbying legislation to tackling corporate donations, Labour have worked tirelessly to clean up politics from the grubby dealings of others. Not one Labour politician has ever faced any accusation of improper behaviour at any tribunal of inquiry. Labour knows what it's like to have to run against Fianna Fáil money, to have to run against Fine Gael money and have to run against Sinn Féin money. Sinn Féin now want to present themselves as the ethical left. They say they want to stand against insider politics and the old boys' club. Well, we in the Labour Party offer them some advice. It's not good enough to describe a convicted tax cheat as a good Republican because he's a member of your old boys' club. It's not good enough to accept £4 million from England to fund political activity in Ireland and then to move it around so you don't have to pay tax on it. It's not good enough to take racist American money from bigoted Trump supporters, like Congressman Pete King of New York, who was one of the architects of the Muslim ban, but who supports Sinn Féin, an insider, one of your old boys' club. It's not good enough to have your Northern Finance Minister send documents of the Renewable Heat Initiative to one of your own insiders and members of the old boys' club in Belfast before it got sign-off. Ethics in public life is important, not just when it's somebody else's old boys' club, but when it's your own. So, Ceann Comhairle, this debate suits both Sinn Féin and Fine Gael. They want the public to think that politics in Ireland is a choice between the Varadkar Conservatives and populist nationalism. Well, it isn't. There are enough of us in this chamber who want to focus on the dignity of the worker, the eradication of homelessness, poverty and COVID-19, who value the liberation of education and the well-being of all our people. We will continue to work with others to bring honour and ethics to Irish politics. Despite often harsh words between us, we have confidence in many individuals and groupings within this Oireachtas. The confidence does not extend to the Taoiseach.
Thank you, Deputy O'Riordan. Now we'll hear the Minister Eamon Ryan and Minister Paschal Donoghue.
Thank you very much indeed, Ceann Comhairle. I am very glad to be able to address the House today on this very serious issue. And like other members of this House, the first I became aware of it when the details were set out as reported in Village magazine. And as we said as a party on those revelations, and I heard it from the Taoiseach at the same time as the Taoiseach did, and nothing I've heard subsequently has changed what he said to me in the first instance in his response. But what we said was that it was important that these issues were addressed in the House, which they were this last week in detail, and we welcome the ability or the chance for that to occur again here today. We stand for parliamentary accountability in our democracy. We also welcomed, having listened to the Taoiseach set out his version of events, his admission that what had happened was not right, indeed his apology for such an error of judgment, and we accepted that apology from him. The disclosure of information in this case was not correct and was not right, and he acknowledged that. And there's a reason why we have the Cabinet rulebook and codes in terms of how we have to do everything through official channels to protect the public interest, but also protect the political system in the end from any accusations of partisanship or patronage. So it's important that we do follow those rules, that we do actually treat documents always with the highest confidence and make that work. But I have confidence as well that this government can and will engage in that other method, partnership, that we actually do need to work collectively together, but also with every section of Irish society and a variety of interests, so we deliver the goals on this government, which is tackling the health crisis, is tackling the housing crisis, and is preparing this country to face the climate challenge ahead of us. So that partnership has to work. That partnership, we said as well in our statement last week, and Deputy Donnelly, wasn't silence, it was us listening and trying to give our assessment in our response, which we did, that we do need to learn lessons from these sort of occasions, as the Taoiseach himself acknowledged and wished, as he said, he had done it differently at that time. Well, we in government commit to doing things differently, to doing things in partnership with the people of this country, the various institutions and vested interests, but not just for their vested interests, for the public interest. And we do that by being open in how we share data, but also by making sure we treat it in confidence and with confidence, and those we work with do the same in every section of Irish society. That is our responsibility. We are in a coalition, it's not a club. And the confidence in the government and the Taoiseach extends confidence in the ability to ask questions and say, if we do, as we have said, that no, that is not right. But that doesn't mean that you step aside from the bigger goal of this coalition and any coalition government to serve the Irish people in changing our health system, our housing system, and preparing us for the climate future as best we can.
Ceann Comhairle, I want to express my full confidence today in Taoiseach Leo Varadkar. I have served in government with the Taoiseach since 2014. I've known him for many years before that. And the personal, the political qualities that I have known in him in that time have been apparent again in recent weeks. His openness, his honesty, and his accountability. His genuine commitment to advance the public interest and, yes, his willingness to acknowledge a mistake. Leo Varadkar's politics are the politics of decency, of progress, and of doing the right thing by our country. His track record is clear. The leadership he demonstrated in delivering the best outcomes for our country in the many challenges of Brexit. His empathy, his decisiveness in leading our country through a demanding and so dark phase of COVID-19. And his unstinting support for the management of our economy, for the management of public pay, and for our public finances that have enabled us to meet this moment of challenge from a position of strength. Contrast, Ceann Comhairle, those qualities and that record with that of the Sinn Féin party. Their attack today is the same as it ever was and it ever will be. Their single transferable critique of our political system. The claim that others act in the interests of elite, of insiders. Sinn Féin, they would have us believe, occupy the high moral ground and is interested only in the public good. I suspect that they themselves know that this is rhetoric. Deputy O'Brien recently described this as the political tactic of left populism. Position yourself as the real representative of the real people and condemn the rest of the political system as acting in the interests of others. Well, we can see the dark places that kind of politics can take you to. It isn't, I believe, the politics of the majority of this House or the politics of the majority of our country. Sinn Féin do not appeal to the better angels of our nature. Instead, they seek to arouse the darker spirits to make their case. It is a deeply cynical politics that they have practiced for too long. For EU membership, but against every treaty that has brought our country closer to Europe. For jobs and business, but against every economic decision pursued by this state in our modern era. Ceann Comhairle, that is the politics of division. It's the defining feature of their politics. It's encapsulated in the motion today. While it positions itself as the only party on the side of ordinary people, it's more in bed with big money than any party in this Dáil. Sinn Féin is the richest party on the island of Ireland, as its finance director indeed confirmed earlier this year, with many staff and an extensive property network across the island. 50 properties, a network that doesn't compare to any other party. Equally, no other party funds itself like Sinn Féin. Was the banning of corporate donations by a previous government, a Fine Gael-led government, maintained by recent ones, Was that the act of a political party that wants to protect an inner circle and keep an old boys' club going? That type of behaviour better matches that description of Sinn Féin itself. As its finance director told the Irish Times earlier in the year, way back, we brought the bulk of it, which is money, into here, which is the Republic. It helped us build the party a lot. It was a lot of money. So Sinn Féin always want to point the finger rather than point the way. And they speak, and Deputy MacDonald spoke, of undermining the state. There is no party less qualified to warn this government of undermining the state than Sinn Féin. They look to provide heat, not light. They look to provide sound and fury, signifying and advancing nothing but their political interests. And this is in contrast with the Taoiseach, which is why I have full confidence in him. He serves and looks to serve our country with distinction. He acts in the public good. He looks to advance the public interest.
Thank you, Minister.
That is his track record, and that is why he deserves the support of this House.
Thank you, Minister. Now, Deputy Owen O'Brien, please.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Today's debate is about low standards. It is about credibility. It is about trust. But most of all is how government business is done by Fine Gael. Last week, Leo Varadkar admitted to leaking a highly confidential document. When his colleague, the then Minister for Health, was asked to leak the very same document, he refused. Yet the leader of Fine Gael passed a document marked confidential and not for circulation to a personal friend and a political supporter. He gave it to an individual and an organisation that stood to gain organisationally and financially from securing that privileged information. Leo Varadkar's claim that he did this in the public interest is simply not credible. The government was not talking to the National Association of General Practitioners, and that organisation had a history of seeking to undermine previous GP contracts. The simple fact is the leader of Fine Gael broke the rules. He breached the confidentiality of Cabinet and sensitive government contract negotiations, all to give a dig-out to a friend. If anyone did this in any other job, they would be sacked. Just because he was head of government does not mean lower standards should be applied. But of course we know this is how Fine Gael does business. They look after those on the inside while leaving the vast majority behind. How many former Fine Gael TDs and ministers are now corporate lobbyists? Enda Kenny and Venture Wage Capital, Brian Hayes and the Banking Payments Federation, Michael Darcy and the Irish Association of Investment Managers, and I could name many, many more. Indeed, it seems Fine Gael is fertile recruiting ground for lobbyists who trade in access and influence. But all of this has a price. Ordinary people pay the consequence for such insider trading. That is why the private sector has a privileged position in housing policy, why government gives more money to big developers and institutional landlords than local authorities and approved housing bodies, why investment funds pay virtually no tax but charge sky-high rents, why banks are bailed out but struggling mortgage holders are left to fend for themselves, and why we have, thanks not only to the current Minister for Housing but his predecessor, the worst social and affordable housing crisis in recent history. Now today, TDs have a clear choice. They can vote confidence in Leo Varadkar and send out a clear signal that all of this is okay, that Fine Gael are still in charge and are calling the shots. Or deputies can say enough is enough. It is time to end low standards in high places. It is time to end insider dealing. It is time for a government that looks out for everyone and not just its friends. Thank you, Ceann Comhairle.
Deputy Róisín Shortall, please.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. The situation we're dealing with here should never really have arisen. The Taoiseach, while Taoiseach last year, engaged in an action which was wrong. He was found out and had to own up. He should have admitted that it was wrong, apologised, and that probably would have been the end of it. However, he never admitted it was wrong. Instead, he concocted a false narrative, a cock and bull story, which clearly misrepresented the truth on a number of counts. Arguably, that was the greater error, because the truth matters. Firstly, he tried to make out that the confidential document which he leaked was somehow not confidential, in spite of it being clearly marked confidential, not for circulation. In spite of the fact also that this was a negotiation document which was still in process with the IMO. The document wasn't capable of being finalised at that point, as there were a number of outstanding issues to be agreed between the parties to it. There wasn't sign-off by the IMO until the 16th of April, and it took another month before the final document was published by the department. The then Minister for Health clarified last week that this was actually the case. Secondly, the Taoiseach tried to make out that what he did was some kind of noble action. He had a legitimate objective. He was honouring the government commitment, as he said. There was no basis whatsoever for this claim. Anyone who knew anything about medical politics at the time knew that the row between the NAGP and the IMO was vicious. The Taoiseach had been a member of the IMO, and anyway, he had lots of friends who were GPs from both organisations, as he has told us. We know the intention of the NAGP's inner sanctum was to scupper the IMO's win on the contract negotiations and to upstage the IMO on the eve of their AGM by releasing details of the arrangement. The Minister for Foreign Affairs actually should check his dates on this, because what he said earlier was simply not correct. Number 4, further, if there was any truth in what the Taoiseach claimed, surely he would have urged Dr O'Toole and the NAGP to support and promote the agreement, but there is no evidence that he did this. In addition, if there was any hint of truth in this, he would, of course, cooperated with the line minister to that end. But no, he went behind the back of the then Minister for Health. Number 5, on the 26th of January 2017, then Minister for Social Protection, Minister Varadkar, was contacted by an ex-Air Corps member in relation to the issue of premature deaths, which is very serious and needs urgent examination. There were 86 premature deaths recorded since the 1980s, including 32 personnel under the age of 50, with many in their 20s, 30s and 40s. 20 members have died since the 2017 contact. His response was to refer to the Cabinet Handbook. He stated, I quote, "It doesn't allow me to go behind the backs of other ministers to enter into confidence with someone else to exclude them," and also that he had signed a contract to observe collective responsibility. So it's not that he didn't know the rules. It was that he decided not to abide by the rules in respect of the IMO document. Number 6. So not only was he aware that he shouldn't have interfered with the work of the Minister for Health, but he also knew that according to the Cabinet Handbook, he was bound by the office holder's code of conduct. This states office holders should respect confidences entrusted to them in the course of their official duties. The Taoiseach clearly breached this requirement. His Trumpian defence that he, as Taoiseach, was the arbiter of what he was allowed to do is laughable. Number 7, finally, what added insult to injury for the public was that, as leader of Fine Gael, he required his cabinet colleagues to demean themselves by parroting the cynically crafted spin lines, repeating his false narrative across the airwaves. The Taoiseach's actions in respect of this sordid affair were unworthy of his office. He damaged the government and he damaged trust in politics.
Thank you, Deputy.
For this reason, and for all of the reasons and all of the facts that I've set out, the Social Democrats cannot vote confidence in him. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Now we move to Minister Sean Fleming, sharing with Minister Peter Burke and Minister Simon Harris. Minister Fleming.
Thank you, Concordia. This motion raises two important issues from my point of view. Firstly, the issue of confidentiality and accountability of a government. This brings me to what I want to see more of in Irish public life. More openness, more transparency at government level. The public want and are entitled to more openness, accountability, transparency in government. We have inherited a Victorian approach to politics in Ireland. I want to see a change. More open discussion and debate on how government spends the public money in advance of decisions we make. We hide behind commercial sensitivity and confidentiality clauses in contracts. As a former chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, I have seen many cases of spending of public money not being publicly accountable. I give examples of many of the public-private partnerships where contracts can run for 25 years. There are confidentiality clauses in these contracts preventing openness and discussion and transparency in accounting. In most cases, these conditions are not justified from the taxpayer's point of view. The same can be said actually of the National Broadband Plan. And we are all familiar with our annual Budget Day announcements. The only surprise if there is something in the Minister's statement that was not already published in the morning's newspaper. And we're actually having a debate here in relation to openness. We need more openness, not less. I want to see more transparency, and a culture of confidentiality in public life is used excessively here in Ireland. The second issue that I see in this debate is the issue of political gamesmanship. We're in the middle of a COVID pandemic. Almost 2,000 people have died. Many people are suffering. Hundreds of thousands of our people are on pandemic unemployment payments and wage subsidy schemes. Businesses are struggling, but the people of Ireland are strong. If the opposition was sincere about accountability, we would have a debate on that issue. Instead, they went for the nuclear option of bringing down a minister and, by extension, this government, resulting in a general election in the middle of an unprecedented COVID crisis. Instead, all they want is disruption and their attempts to turn Dáil Éireann into a reality TV show of the likes of Jerry Springer and Jeremy Kyle. I can tell you, you will not succeed here tonight.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. I welcome the opportunity to express confidence in the Taoiseach and the government. This motion, manufactured by those in Sinn Féin that pretend to have morals and principles, from a party whose actions continue to belie its public statements in this House. Sinn Féin talk about credibility, while on the other hand they protect and reward their inner circle. Sinn Féin talk about a cosy boys' club, while they themselves cosy up to tax cheats and subversives. Ask the family of Robert McCartney who protects its elites and untouchables. Ask former Senator Maria Cahill or Paddy McGahan about the kangaroo courts, its lies and its deceit. No wonder Sinn Féin wanted to abolish the Special Criminal Court. Sinn Féin is the anti-partition party who uses partition to its distinct advantage, circumventing rules and ethics. A party who claims COVID payments in the north and sits on this Oireachtas in the south. Those with €10,000 resting in their bank accounts for 6 months while tricking the Irish public into believing they're on the average industrial wage. This from the richest party in our state. To be a former president of Sinn Féin, you must call a tax cheat a good Republican. The current president uses the words, a very nice man. These words sum up 3 words, the corruption of Sinn Féin and the lies. Research Services Ireland, a bogus company set up to siphon taxpayers' money for the cosy boys in Sinn Féin in the north. 36 MLAs claiming over £700,000 through this company ran by the Sinn Féin Finance Department. Mileage and expenses galore. The only problem was that after 11,500 miles clocked, £5,000 pocketed, one of the cosy boys didn't even drive. A central service company used because other research facilities could not, as the work was deemed too sensitive. After all, Ceann Comhairle, in Sinn Féin, the untouchables must be protected.
Minister Harris.
Thanks very much, Ceann Comhairle, and I'm delighted to rise tonight to express confidence in the Taoiseach. But I must say I'm genuinely worried about the direction of political discourse in our country. I'm worried that we now live in a world and a country where some strive to see those with political differences as enemies rather than decent people with opposing views. I'm worried that there's a real effort underway that we should live in a country where you can't make a mistake without the off-with-their-head brigade seeking a political execution. This is not who we are. This is not whom we must become. We are better than that. And sadly, often the parties who apply such harsh judgments to others refuse to apply it to themselves. The Taoiseach made a mistake. He accounted to this House for it, he apologised and he explained his rationale. But of course, for some in here, led by Sinn Féin, that will never be enough. They have decided to measure political effectiveness not in terms of legislation passed or bipartisan work underway or policy proposals to tackle major societal issues, but rather in decibel levels, in units of anger and in soundbites of division. A good day at the office for Sinn Féin is a day when they've sown the seeds of mistrust and misinformation about a political opponent and amplified it online, often with the help of faceless trolls. For them to succeed, they believe others must fail. And this week, we saw them engage in the grubby politics of let them deny it. I've worked with so many good people from across the political spectrum in this House. Good people, decent people, sincere people. But this is a stunt. It's simply another attempt to divide. Leo Varadkar is a committed, energetic, smart, sincere leader. I've seen firsthand his judgment during the COVID pandemic, his leadership in trying to keep us all safe as we grappled with a deadly virus. We would not have a new GP agreement were it not for his leadership. He set it as an absolute priority on becoming Taoiseach. He brought departments together around the table. He banged heads together. He set objectives, timelines and funding streams, and he got it done. He got it done. And you know what? When he made a mistake, he apologised. Has anyone else in this House ever made a mistake? Maybe you attended a public gathering in Northern Ireland in breach of public health guidelines. Anyone? Maybe you staged an effective political rally in a graveyard in the midst of severe restrictions when people couldn't go to their close relative's funeral, despite the fact that the deceased was not even being buried in that cemetery. Maybe you were invited to a key briefing on COVID-19 with our top medical experts, but you were too busy, left early, and then claimed that you weren't fully briefed on the pandemic. Or maybe you came into this House and used parliamentary privilege to wrongly accuse people of financial wrongdoing, and when you yourself were proven wrong, you sadly forgot to apologise. Maybe you jumped up and down in outrage and smears in this chamber at Frances Fitzgerald, and when she was completely exonerated by Judge Charlton, you also forgot to apologise. Everybody makes mistakes, and I'm sure none of us wish to be defined by them. I also want to say clearly on the record of this House, the smears and innuendo that are creeping into political life need to stop. There was an undertone in the last week, and we all know it, you all know it, and none of you called it out. Not one of you called it out. It's wrong, and it can't go unchecked. It's time to focus on the issues. In the week, the people of the United States, thank God, rejected the politics of Trumpism. Don't you dare try to introduce it in this country.
Thank you very much. We move now to Deputy Pa Daly, please. Deputy Pa Daly.
Margaret Ceann Comhairle. In the course of a conversation with a constituent last week, I learned that it was 100 years ago, last Wednesday, since the Black and Tans had burned her grandfather's creamery. He had to go on the run with a price of £1,000 on his head, leaving his family. Afterwards, I received a message saying, our grandparents were committed to a republic, a better world, equality of access to education and employment, and their democratic right to vote. Equality of access. For these just rights, she said, they risked their livelihoods and their lives. And are we as TDs staying true to this legacy? Spin will not paper over these cracks. Are we now going to deliver a vote of confidence to this Taoiseach in the light of the leaking of confidential information, which has been well discussed? We know that the Taoiseach believes that every member of this House routinely leaks information. He believes that a culture of spin and calculated leaks is completely acceptable. We remembered the promise of the so-called democratic revolution of former Taoiseach Enda Kenny, but our lot was a bank bailout and the continued prosperity of the well-heeled, the Golden Circle. Who benefits from this type of cronyism? Banks, insurance industry, Fine Gael's friends. But what fate is in store for you if you're not well connected? Weeks ago, we had the survivors of mother and baby homes being ignored and dismissed by this very government. Yet those who know the Taoiseach personally get confidential documents posted to them without question. It shows the insidious nature of insider politics. But this leads to, as the phrase in Kerry goes, Dini atá fága in áit na laughingina. Those who are neglected or left behind, that seems to be the fate of rural Ireland with this Taoiseach and his party. Can people in rural Ireland enter the Golden Circle, the prism of privilege, the fortress of the favoured? Certainly not school secretaries with no pension or job security on a two-tier pay scale. One I know worked for 28 years under these conditions. These secretaries were promised help, but were then told that to help would open the floodgates. Certainly not the Debenhams workers that I saw in Tralee at the weekend, maintaining their vigil through the November nights with their hopes of assistance from Fine Gael or their partners in government fading fast. Certainly not the small inshore fishermen of the southwest who see the bays of Kerry literally being cleaned out by the larger boats following the recent High Court case. Unlike the vulture funds, there will be no rushed legislation for those who choose to maintain a family fishing tradition. Certainly not seasonal workers, tour guides, bar staff and those in music and the arts excluded from the PUP. And finally, certainly not those who live off the main roads of rural Ireland, who cannot access broadband after the populous areas were carved up by the large companies and the state is again left to pick up the tab. One school in Kerry, when it contacted the Department of Education to complain about substandard broadband, was told, contact your local representatives. Today is the 100th anniversary of the end of the siege of Tralee, when, amongst other events, County Hall, the seat of local democracy, was burnt down by occupying Blackentans. The Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil-controlled County Council doesn't want to talk about this event or commemorate it in any way. Maybe they're afraid that the motives of those who struggled for equality 100 years ago, remembering men like Frank Hoffman, John Cantillon and Michael Maguire, would lay bare the contrast between the promise of then and the reality of now. I oppose this motion.
Thank you, Deputy Daly. Now we move to Deputy Breed-Smith, sharing with Deputy Murphy and Deputy Barry.
We've no doubt where this debate is going. The conduct of it is quite shocking, and those who think they're debating the Sinn Féin motion, as they've repeatedly said on the other side of the House, are wrong. We're debating your motion. And it's quite clear what the outcome will be, that after tonight, normal people will look back and say, he got away with it again. And normal people, like a young care worker in a small local hospital who was suspended for 7 weeks for daring to put a post on Facebook criticising a management decision to spend multiples of her annual wage, which was less than 30,000 a year at the time, on a piece of art when there was a trolley crisis in her hospital. She didn't break a confidentiality, she expressed a wildly held view of waste of resources during a health crisis. Normal people, like 500 paramedics who joined a union called NASRA, a breakaway union, a rival union, Taoiseach, one which you said repeatedly to us in the last Dáil the government could not and would not deal with because they were outside the ICTU camp. Well, you clearly had two sets of morals for two different types of people, your friends and the normal 500 paramedics who work day in, day out for this country. What really amuses me, though, is how Fianna Fáil and the Greens are circling the wagons of Leo Varadkar and Fine Gael here tonight. Not because they actually like Leo Varadkar, or indeed probably don't even like most of Fine Gael, not because I believe that they believe him, I believe they don't believe him, and not because it isn't inappropriate and unbecoming of his conduct as Taoiseach to do what he did, not because it's true that he was right, but because it's true that he was wrong. But they're doing it out of self-preservation. And Eamon Ryan's statement here tonight was to stoop really low and use the climate crisis as a reason for backing this confidence motion in Leo Varadkar. Normal people will be struck tonight by the way Leo Varadkar gets away with it again. And when they think of Leo Varadkar, they'll think of welfare cheats us all, they'll think of a tax on NEFIT, and they'll think of this disgraceful excuse of a then Taoiseach lying to everybody and getting away with it again.
Deputy Paul Murphy.
Deputy
McBarry, yeah.
If the Taoiseach survives tonight's vote, it will be thanks in large measure to Fianna Fáil and Green Party deputies whose votes will be noted with disapproval by some, and with disgust by many others. He will also survive thanks to the support of a corporate media which has refused to frame this scandal as a matter which might require resignation. They recognise the Taoiseach as a skilful and capable representative of the capitalist establishment, and as a man who can play an important role for the system when he takes the reins as Taoiseach and is charged with implementing austerity in a post-COVID era. I have no confidence in Leo Varadkar on the leaks issue. He assisted a doctors' organisation, a breakaway within the health service, which opposed free GP care for the under-6s, while locking out another breakaway group, the ambulance paramedics, more than 500 of them, who campaigned for trade union rights. I have no confidence in him when he wants to limit the increase in the minimum wage next year to less than 1%. And last but not least, I have no confidence in him when he blocked the Duffy-Cahill report in the last Dáil and takes no action whatsoever to deliver a just settlement for the Debenhams workers in this one.
Thanks, Ceann Comhairle. A Fianna Fáil Taoiseach proposing a motion of confidence in a Fine Gael Taoiseach. It's an appropriate end to civil war politics. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael uniting to defend corrupt behaviour, while the Greens are asleep at the wheel. Tonight, Leo Varadkar will get away with it. As a result, he'll face no consequence as a result of breaking the Code of Conduct for TDs, as a result of breaking the Code of Conduct for office holders, and for committing a crime under the Corruption Offences Act. But people have seen how the establishment operates. At Golfgate, where politicians, lobbyists and judges flout the rules to rub shoulders with each other's. With the revolving door from senior Fine Gael politician to banking lobbyist. And now with the Taoiseach himself pulling strings for his friends. It's the Taoiseach which is guilty of divisive politics. It's the Taoiseach which is guilty in his campaign based on fabricated statistics of welfare cheats, cheat us all. We need rid of this government which is millionaires serving the interests of billionaires, and we need a government based on left and socialist policies to serve the interests of ordinary people.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy, you've accused the Taoiseach of committing a crime that is completely out of order. It is not acceptable in this forum in any circumstances. And I think you should withdraw that statement. The commission of crimes is something that's adjudicated on by a court of law, not by any of us sitting here in Dáil Éireann.
If you want, I'll rephrase it to say that I think that there is very clear evidence, but it, of course, is not for me to decide, but that the Taoiseach may well have breached Section 7(2) of the Corruption Offences Act, which says that someone can't give information that they obtain as a result of their high office to someone else who benefits from it.
We go ahead to Minister Hildegard Naughton, sharing with Deputy Joe McHugh and Minister Martin Hayden.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Ceann Comhairle, the Taoiseach gave a full and frank account of his actions and motivations last week in this House and took a considerable amount of time answering deputies' questions. Today is 2 hours of statements and counter-statements, a rehash of last week's events, when we are in the midst of the most serious health crisis to face our nation and staring down the barrel of a no-deal Brexit. We will spend valuable time today making speeches about a document, the detail of which was already in the public domain when the Taoiseach passed it on. There were medical journalists writing detailed articles on the deal before this document was shared. This was not some state secret being passed to the enemy, like some in the opposition would spin it. I would remind the House that we are expecting a large budget deficit of €22 billion in 2020,
Government debt is high in historical and international terms and is a risk to the public finances and the economy. There are hundreds of thousands of people unemployed and businesses worried if they will ever reopen. And yet we are here at considerable cost to the taxpayer debating a motion for no good reason other than political opportunism. I am not for 1 minute saying that any member of government, or this House for that matter, should be unaccountable. They most certainly should. The Taoiseach made himself available and accountable last week for detailed questioning by deputies. He answered completely and honestly. He has admitted he should have done things differently, and he apologised for it. Everyone in politics makes mistakes. It's human nature. Some mistakes are more serious than others. The Taoiseach's error is certainly not one that warrants resignation. It was a mistake of process rather than substance. I very much appreciate that the opposition will make hay while the sun shines and attempt to make out that every error is some national crisis. That is politics, but it's bad politics. We have steadied the ship during COVID-19, and I'm particularly conscious of the leading role that Leo Varadkar took in that. He has my full confidence.
Deputy Joe McHugh.
Leo Varadkar is a politician who gets things done. As Taoiseach, he worked hard to get so many things done, and as Taoiseach, he worked very closely with his cabinet colleagues, and he was always informed. He was solution-focused and was always determined to find a solution, even in the most difficult of circumstances. He took his mandate as Taoiseach very seriously and at all times was conscious of the enormous responsibility placed on his very young shoulders. Leo does not wear his heart on his sleeve, but that does not diminish his passion to serve all of the people and does not diminish his ambition to get things done. The politics presented to us tonight is the rawest and most fundamental form, the politics of power. The real priority political issues of the day are sidelined. COVID-19, people are still dying, Brexit. But no, the ambition tonight is to inflict maximum political damage. Leo knows only too well that he would have done things differently. He has acknowledged that. But to hear this nonsense tonight, talking about insiders and cosy clubs, is nothing short of a mockery. A deal to include all GPs in a contract, GPs who look after the old, the young and the sick. Leo wanted to get things done. That was his motivation, and Sinn Féin do not have a monopoly on helping people. And while the NAGP were outside the gates of Leinster House, Sinn Féin were there with them, roaring and shouting at the government to come up with a solution. Unfortunately, the politics we are witnessing here tonight will continue to be the narrow, divisive and disruptive politics in the period ahead. This will be the continuation of the roaring and the shouting, and it will be fractious. Sinn Féin will be 100% right 100% of the time and will continue to accuse the government of being 100% wrong 100% of the time. And Mary Lou, in her tweet just yesterday or the day before, on about the Old Boys Network. Well, the reason we are having this debate tonight is because of the Old Boys Network around a monitor up somewhere in Belfast tonight. They have decided to use our valuable time in the interest of power, and they have sidelined the important issues of tonight. And Pearse Doherty, who got elected 10 years ago this month, will continue with your shouting and roaring with nothing to show for it, Pearse, but you can do all the shouting and roaring that you want. You will not be making the decisions. It will be the boys in the Old Boys Network around the monitor in Belfast. Gormaga.
Minister Martin Hayden, please.
Gormaga. I am very happy to vote confidence in our Taoiseach and this government here today. I'm not going to spend my limited time expanding on that confidence in Leo Varadkar, which I look forward to voting on shortly, because we all know that the motion put down by Sinn Féin has nothing to do with Leo. This is all about Sinn Féin's focus on political game playing. Ceann Comhairle, in June 2020, the leader of Sinn Féin proclaimed, and I quote, "Be very sure you will see in action the most coherent and effective opposition in the history of the state." People would have been forgiven for thinking that Sinn Féin were moving away from the populist politics of the past. Populism like trying to convince the public that they were entitled to be in government after a general election, even though they got less than 1/4 of the overall vote. So convinced were Sinn Féin of this entitlement, they organised a series of public meetings all around the country to demand their getting into power. Sinn Féin displayed the same understanding of the electoral system as Donald Trump has in recent days. But in fairness, at least he nearly did get half the vote in his election. That Sinn Féin can stand here with a straight face today is interesting in the context of their recent decision to accept a donation of more than £4 million from the estate of William Hampden, a far cry from the maximum allowable donation under Irish electoral law of €2,500. Today, obviously, is an attempt by Sinn Féin to change the narrative. Will Sinn Féin, given its recent windfall, be offering to reimburse the taxpayer for the €25,000 it has cost to bring us here for this vote today? I wonder would any Sinn Féin deputy be willing to stand up for more than an hour and answer questions as Leo Varadkar did on that donation? Or indeed, the circumstances surrounding the resignation of Sinn Féin members over the acceptance of COVID state grants, and why it was only when the media got wind of the story that grants had been paid into Sinn Féin accounts was there any action taken. I presume Sinn Féin's same standard of accountability is not required in this instance. Instead of being an effective, constructive opposition, they opt for populism once again. Count Corda, at a time of a COVID pandemic, of a Brexit crunch point fast approaching, and of a number of key challenges facing our country, Sinn Féin are more concerned with political one-upmanship and point scoring. That is not the politics that I am interested in. That is not a politics that serves our country well. And that's why I will happily vote confidence in our Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, and this government here today, so that we can get on with the very important work that lies ahead for our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Hayden. Our next contributor is Deputy Pearse Doherty, please.
The issues at stake are very clear. Leo Varadkar, as Taoiseach in 2019, gave a confidential draft document, a contract worth €210 million, that was still under discussion with the IMO, to his friend, who is the president of a rival organisation, on his request. Not through official channels, but through private text messages before deleting all traces of the correspondence. A friend of the Taoiseach requested a confidential government document by text message, and Leo delivered. End of. Had a civil servant done the same thing, it would constitute gross misconduct. It would trigger a disciplinary action, and it would be grounds for dismissal. And what are the consequences for the Taoiseach? Well, Fianna Fáil, the Green Party and Fine Gael believe that there should be no consequences, no sanction. Well, we disagree. The Taoiseach has crossed the line, and we are expected to just look away. Well, this isn't good enough. Truth be told, this is how Fine Gael does its business. The politics of the insider, the favour for friends, the access to power for those in high places. But that politics of the insider comes at a price for those who are on the outside. Just consider insurance. People are still being ripped off by extortionate premium costs. Why? Because the insurance industry sat down with Minister Paschal Donoghue and asked them to ensure that key sections of my legislation passed by these houses were blocked, and the Minister did as he was asked. Tens of thousands of mortgage holders have seen their homes, their mortgages sold to vulture funds. And the vultures asked Fine Gael to block legislation that I introduced that wouldn't allow for the sale of those mortgages without their consent, and Fine Gael did as they were asked. Because that's how power works for Fine Gael. One day they are tasked with holding vested interests to account, the next day they become the chief lobbyists on the other side. And just look at the record. A Fine Gael minister, Michael Darcy, spends 3 years in the Department of Finance, 3 years being lobbied by the fund industry, and 3 months after leaving the office, he becomes the chief lobbyist. Take the banks. Another Fine Gael minister, Brian Hayes, spent 3 years in the Department of Finance. Where is he now? The chief lobbyist for the banking and vulture fund industry. The revolving door keeps spinning. It is a pattern and a consistent one. It is the politics of Leo Varadkar. Those on the inside will always have his ear. Now, the Taoiseach's excuse for leaking these confidential documents simply doesn't hold up. He claims that it was some part of a mastermind strategy to get the contract over the line. But strategy requires initiative, and this wasn't his initiative. This was his friend who requested this document from the Minister for Health, and the Minister for Health refused to give it to him because it was confidential. But Leo delivered for his friend. When he was asked to get it, Leo obliged. In secret, without telling anybody, covering his tracks, deleting the correspondence. He claims that leaking the document was part of a strategy to engage with the NAGP, but we know that there was no engagement with the NAGP by government or the Department of Health. Indeed, the only engagement was when Leo Varadkar took a confidential document, stuck it in the post and gave it to his friend, who was the head of the rival organisation to the IMO. And he says that the agreement was in the public domain, but it wasn't. Every single one of the 130 pages had stamped across it, confidential, not for circulation, and we know that there was at least 35 further changes. Leo Varadkar has been caught red-handed. He leaked confidential, commercially sensitive government information to a friend. He and his government colleagues think he is above accountability, but he isn't, and he shouldn't be. So the question here in this House is, are we going to stand for this? Are we going to allow for this kind of cosy insiders club to continue, or are we going to vote for accountability, because we in Sinn Féin have no confidence in this Taoiseach?
Thank you very much, Deputy. Deputy Sean Canny sharing with Deputy Tobin and Deputy Fitzpatrick. Deputy Canny, please.
Thank you very much, Ken Corlett. I take the opportunity to speak on this debate this evening. I'm very much struck by the level of debate we're having and what we're talking about. Down in Galway East, where we have a constituency of rural and urban, we have a lot of issues. It has been said here tonight that we're wasting our time. We have to have the debate, but I think we've lost a lot of credibility as politicians if we don't go back to the real job we have to do. We have to bring this country out of this pandemic. We got good news yesterday that there is a vaccination, maybe, but we've got to keep people in work. We've got to save jobs. We've got to make sure that whatever we do in this House is for the people. We can have times when we have debates about these issues, but right now I think it's time that every politician in this chamber who has been elected to serve the people put the focus on what we need to be doing. I was elected. I choose to go into opposition. I said I would be in constructive opposition. I'm here to call the government to account if I think they're not doing things right. But I'm also here to support the government when I feel they need help. And I think this evening they need a bit of help to get them out of this. And I will be supporting them. But I will tell you something. We need to make sure that from now on we do things right. And also we make sure that we focus on the issues where people are suffering, where small business people don't know what to do. And also we have to make sure that we deal with the school secretaries, the CE supervisors. These are the real issues that we need to deal with and that I want to deal with in this hall. Thank you.
The reason why this is so important today is because Ireland has been racked by insider circles for decades. Insider circles are not a victimless crime. They have a radical influence on the development of society and everybody else's ability to live in this society. So we have a situation where we either can call it out or we can give licence to it. And I honestly believe that if we vote confidence in the Taoiseach today, this Dáil gives licence to this type of behaviour in the future. How can you turn around to anybody else at any level of government or the civil service in future if they do exactly the same thing in the future? And the Fine Gael ministers who are rallying around the Taoiseach today know very well if they did exactly the same thing, they will be out the door without touching the ground. And that's a fact. You know that. And it's incredible. I've listened to Jim O'Callaghan, who's positioned himself recently as the conscience of Fianna Fáil, if that's not an oxymoron at this stage. But what Jim O'Callaghan has basically said is he's like the grand old Duke of York. He's marched his troops to the top of the hill. But this is his opportunity, this vote tonight, to put his money where his mouth is. And the Greens are at a crossroads, I can't call you. The Greens could try to crowbar some level of ethics into this government, or that they can get locked into the misgovernance of this coalition for the next 3 years. Their actions tonight, I believe, will define them for about a decade after this. And the question I'll ask you, there's been a lot of questions talked today about the restrictions. Dara Calleary and Phil Hogan resigned from their political jobs because they were seen to break the COVID restrictions that were in place at the time. And indeed, there's plenty of talk at the moment with regards to Seamus Wolfe resigning from the Supreme Court. Taoiseach, did you break COVID restrictions in May by having friends over to the house you were staying in Farmley for drinks? Gurb Magath.
Peter Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. What the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar did in relationship to handing over confidential documents to a GP friend was wrong. Also, the fact that his then Minister for Health, Simon Howes, was not aware of the sharing of information was also wrong. In my opinion, this displayed a complete lack of trust in this then Minister for Health. The bottom line here is that the then Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, displayed a complete lack of judgment and undermining his colleagues in both his own party and the government. If a situation like this was to occur with one of his colleagues in government, I doubt whether the Taoiseach would take the same approach. The record speaks for itself on this, and in the past, Leo Varadkar has thrown colleagues under the bus for similar situations. Again, I want to state that Leo Varadkar has done wrong. He needs to face the consequences for his actions. In my opinion, his own party needs to reprimand him. It is their responsibility to deal with this matter. The current government, led by Micheál Martin, was not party to this action of Leo Varadkar and should not be drawn into this mess. Fine Gael need to stand up now and demonstrate complete transparency in their action and how they intend dealing with this. This should be dealt internally within Fine Gael. The fact of the matter is, we are now here in the Convention Centre today at an additional cost of over €25,000 of taxpayers' money to debate today. It is a complete waste of taxpayers' money. We are presently in the midst of a global pandemic. We have Brexit coming in under 2 months, and here we are debating in the Convention Centre a motion in relation to Leo Varadkar actions he took while he was Taoiseach of the previous government. Surely we have more important issues to debate. Ceann Comhairle, I will be supporting this motion of confidence in Leo Varadkar today. It is not because I believe he did not do anything wrong. In fact, what he did was wrong, and he should face the consequence of it, and his actions should be taken by his own party, Fine Gael. As I said, the current government has far more important issues to deal with than those we are dealing with today. COVID-19 and Brexit needs our full attention right now. We need a strong government to deal with these issues, and in my opinion, the current government, led by Micheál Martin, is a strong one and needs to be given the opportunity to govern. What we don't need is issues like this to come before us today and deflect from the real issues of today. I want to once more, Ceann Comhairle, say that I will be supporting the motion of confidence in Leo Varadkar for the reasons I have outlined today, but I do expect his own party, Fine Gael, to take some form of disciplinary action so that in the future this kind of behaviour does not happen. We cannot have one rule for Leo Varadkar and rules for everybody else. Go, my God.
Deputy, now we move to Deputy Richard Bruton, sharing with Deputy Jennifer Carroll McNeill. Deputy Bruton.
Thanks very much, Ceann Comhairle. I am happy to rise to vote confidence in the Taoiseach Deputy Leo Varadkar. I think at a time when the nation is holding its breath and many people are striving hard to demonstrate solidarity with people who are suffering hugely as a result of this COVID crisis, when people's mental health is on the line, when isolation is affecting people, when businesses are struggling just to survive, what does Sinn Féin come up with? It comes up with this attempt to blow up an error for which the Taoiseach has been fully accountable in this House into a nuclear incident, to create this DEFCON 1 environment which they feel that they can thrive in, with their hollow rhetoric pounded out here once again, and their troops coming in one after one to read the scripts, to draw parallels to long since events that have occurred, to try to muster this sense of division within our community. I think what most angers people when they follow sport is to see someone go into the penalty area and dive and look, after writhing and screaming on the ground, look for the red card and look for a penalty. That's deep cynicism. That's not the beautiful game that brings so much commitment and courage that we all admire in our football. And we have a very similar situation today. Today's motion is motivated by a cynicism. It is the worst form of tribal politics that we are going back to, where we seek to portray our opponents in the most black colours we can dream up. And one after the other, people come in with their theatrical description of insiders and these hollow words that they try to portray, capitalists and black and tans. These are the sort of images that people are trying to drill up in a debate like this. We're seeing tribal politics across the globe today, and we need to take a pull at ourselves before we understand where this is going to bring us. We all look with disdain at the fake news, at the vicious characterization that we've seen in other countries of opponents, of the pandering to prejudice that has divided a lot of communities. But Ireland is fortunate that we have not had those divisions. And we need to find a politics that is more honest with people, that faces up squarely to the sort of challenges that people are trying to contend with in their daily lives. That is the work of a parliament. But sadly, we seem to think that it is this theatrical approach that is what politics should be about. We are sent here to try to resolve these differences, to resolve conflict, not to create division. And I think Leo Varadkar has been a politician that has done that throughout his career. He sought to progress change in a community where he understood that change is disruptive and can hurt people. And he has sought to bring people with us. People are looking to politics now for competence and compassion. And that's what Leo Varadkar has shown, particularly during this difficult COVID crisis. But his political opponents want to drag him down, and that's where this motion has come from. It is tried to prolong this sense of division and damage, but it is directly out of that stable of fake news and the echo chamber of the social media that they seek to drive those messages through. But politics can be better than that. Politics will be better than that, and we will win this motion of confidence and allow this government, which is a unique balance, to bring this country to a much better Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy Bruton. Now, Deputy Carol McNeill. Deputy Carol McNeill.
I'm here to state confidence in the Taoiseach and indeed to express confidence in this government and all of the ministers working so hard to recover our country and our society during this dreadful pandemic. It's preposterous that this Parliament is spending its time today on this political stunt by Sinn Féin instead of the major issues of the day. The Taoiseach made himself immediately available to this House, answered every and all question put to him and was happy to do so, appropriate for him to do so. But having spent the time on that, to cause this House to repeat its own debate in this way, it's only play acting. It's not serious, it's not genuine. If it was, Sinn Féin would have put this motion down immediately. As the Taoiseach said, it is only an opportunity to get another run of publicity for the weekend. But there aren't people in here who are surprised at all by that, no matter the jeers and the sneers that are pushed out for everyone around. We all see that failure to respect basic facts, the complete devotion to populist politics that have been so destructive around the world, and the utter lack of restraint as recently as today on a really serious issue. But Sinn Féin are not serious liberal democratic parliamentarians, not the responsible opposition as others have been before them and others are here yet today. Sinn Féin are in the politics for the imagery, not the tough decision-making of senior political office and not the years and yards of detail that goes before it. And that image-focused, superficial approach to policy is exposed week after week. Your health spokesperson promises an extra 100 ICU beds and when asked can't tell where they should go, only that he's going to write to the HSE to tell them hurry on. The Justice spokesperson leads the charge last week to break the link between a government pandemic plan and the Gardaí's capacity to enforce it for its duration. And the Sinn Féin party leader, after crying foul she wasn't included in information on the pandemic, couldn't find it her way to stay for the duration of briefing provided by senior medical officials. And all of that is because Sinn Féin's not concerned by detail, but only by theatre. But we all saw Sinn Féin theatre in Milltown Cemetery after the funeral of Bobby Storey, which was happening at that stage some 12 kilometres away on the other side of town. Not so much a funeral at that point anymore as an opportunity for pageantry and for the big men in this House to stand right up front with the big men that went before them. We all saw the lack of concern for detail when it emerged that three Sinn Féin representatives had €10,000 resting in their accounts from the COVID support payments for over 6 months. Instantly sacked, yes, when the BBC uncovered it, but what before then? And can we just ask in all seriousness, how did they not notice it? Is there so much money in Sinn Féin accounts that €10,000 here or there didn't register at all for 3 separate people? Was it only 3? Did others get it? It is shady. You've plenty to say about everyone else. You're more than happy to create links and conspiracies that don't exist. But when confronted in your own party about serious criminal acts, there are no people with anything to say on anything. Think back to all those people who saw nothing in or near a packed pub in Belfast the night Robert McCartney was brutally murdered. Think about all those smears and lies to discredit Maria Cahill, who had the temerity and extraordinary bravery to speak out against one of your elites, one of your untouchables, to claim she was mentally unstable, to imply her promiscuous, to spread hate and bile and untruths, and all because she stood up and gave an account of her abusive experience and your failure to respond to it. Sinn Féin is a party that's rife with the culture of cover-up, only what they're covering up has had much graver consequences for the lives of people on this island. Can you imagine, switch out the names and just imagine Leo Varadkar or any other party leadership in this House being happy to stand over what you do? It is literally inconceivable. If Sinn Féin actually thinks that Leo Varadkar should resign for this matter, which warrants questions in the Dáil, and he has been accountable, then why wouldn't Michelle O'Neill resign? To that matter, why not Mary Lou MacDonald, Pierce Doherty and the others who travelled and attended and made no semblance of abiding by the rules, to such an extent that there's a police investigation into it since? Sinn Féin are the masters of throwing the stones and the rockets around them, but they never turn the light on themselves, and we know that. And the silent, polite, unabusive, good people of Ireland who remain horrified by your actions, they know it too.
Deputy Matty McGrath sharing with Deputy Carl Nolan and Deputy Danny Healy-Rae.
I want to begin my brief contribution here this evening by saying that I have no intention in personalising this issue. I have no particular axe to grind with the Taoiseach, even though we have fundamentally disagreed on a number of important matters. Nevertheless, I am convinced that there are critically important issues at stake here. I think it is also worth recalling that this fiasco is merely the latest instance of a series of events that have brought the operation of the Dáil and our national parliament into disrepute. Last year it was Swinggate, then Votegate, and this year it is Leakgate, and the year is not even over. Taoiseach, I do want to acknowledge that you displayed willingness to come before the House last week. But quite frankly, such actions on your part cannot or should not act as some kind of parliamentary absolution. Taoiseach, you were the senior political office holder in the land when you deliberately leaked the draft contract. You are thereby held to a higher standard. Yet in the last week we have seen no meaningful action in terms of parliamentary or political party sanction. The Taoiseach and your Cabinet colleagues have backed you to the hilt, but not a single one of them has been able to identify what sanction you should rightly face. A two-hour session facing questions in the Dáil cannot be the limit of your responsibility or indeed your accountability in this serious matter. If there was even the slightest hint of a sanction being applied before this debate, then I would have a different view. I'm concerned about the lack of consistency in regard to sanctions. We have seen a number of Oireachtas members already sanctioned this year, and the year hasn't ended. The general public are asking politicians like myself why there isn't a consistency in terms of sanctions and why there is a lack of consistency in this case. The lack of sanction in this case forced the opposition's hand. So in that respect, the fault lies with the Taoiseach and the government alone. And because of this fact, and because of this stark reality, I will be voting no confidence in the Taoiseach.
Deputy McGrath.
duty. Councillor, I'm happy to stand here this evening, but I'm a guest, and the people at home are a guest. When the people of Tipperary have 976 children waiting for emergency speech and language treatment, and North Tipperary and East Limerick 1,079. When all the people on the COVID payments are now going to be asked to pay tax on the payments. When all the hospitals and the health services are so bad. When we're so much concerned about the failings of the HSE to deal with the pandemic and to deal with the tests and to deal with the contract tracing. When the Minister, Taoiseach was Minister for Health, when he chose the site for the Children's Hospital, there's now a black, dark hole in history. When I think of the men of 100 years ago, when I think of young Michael Hogan who lost his life with others in Bloody Sunday in Cove Park, when I think of Sean Trasick and Liam O'Lynchick and people like that, and when I see the standards here now, how they have failed and slipped. When I saw what happened to Phil Hogan in the early 80s, when he leaked by accident a page of the budget with nothing written across the top of it, private and confidential, and I see the standards now. When I see what happened to Minister Cleary, when I see what happened to Minister Cowan, and they had to be held accountable. But I later blame it Taoiseach Micheál Martin for being so feeble, inept and weak here in dealing with this. The standards have dropped so much. The young people, the class of last year and now this year, first-year students, what they've gone through, and all the people that are out there, the pensioners that couldn't get a penny in support for the pandemic, many of them in business, and the many, many areas of neglect and abuse. When I see the 300,000 women, people waiting for cancer treatments, and I see the cervical check, and I see breast check, everything stacked up, and the issues of mental health, I think it's a shame what's going on here tonight.
Thank you, Deputy Healy-Rae.
Thank you very much, Councillor. The people of Ireland are very disappointed, very hurt with this duplication here again this evening. And when you think of all the things that are wrong in Councillor, and where people won't be able to go to the north now to get their eyes cataracts removed, or people in pain are not being seen after by the HSE, and they won't be able to travel to Belfast after the 1st of January. It's very wrong what's going on here tonight, Councillor. And you see, Sinn Féin know very well that Fianna Fáil are going to support Fine Gael here tonight. And they're joined at the hip, and they're the one party now, only just to change the name. And you see, when it came down to it, Sinn Féin voted to reduce our speaking time here. That's why I will a minute this evening, Councillor. But I'm saying to you all, he'd want to cop on because the people of Ireland won't stand for this much longer.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Now we go to Deputy Marion Harkin, who's sharing with Deputy Thomas Pringle.
Thank you, Can Corla. By passing on a document marked confidential to his friend Matthew O'Toole in the context of negotiations on a GP contract, the Taoiseach undermined that system of negotiation. However, it is worth noting that the document concerned was partly, if not largely, in the public arena. The IMO had issued a 5-page summary document which outlined the important financial and other components several days before the Taoiseach passed it on to Matthew O'Toole. Nonetheless, it was wrong. It should, at the very least, have been passed on through formal channels. The Taoiseach came to the Dáil last week. He accepted his errors of judgment and apologised. He made a mistake, a serious mistake, but he has apologised publicly more than once. In my opinion, intent matters as much, if not more, than process. And while the process was wrong, I accept the Taoiseach's explanation, the Taoiseach's explanation, that his intent was good, in that it was to secure universal acceptance of a GP contract across the GP community. Yesterday, an article was published purporting to show that the Taoiseach had deliberately attempted to mislead the Dáil as to the extent of his friendship with Matthew O'Toole. I have looked at that evidence, which consists largely of WhatsApp messages from Matthew O'Toole. And running through those messages was a pervasive sense of entitlement. We're the boys who run the show, or who should run the show. And underpinning those flights of fancy was the claim of easy access to the Taoiseach and senior ministers. However, Minister O'Toole has in media reports accepted the Taoiseach's version of 3 meetings, so I see no evidence of a smoking gun. I have not deviated from the subject in hand tonight to make political points because there are many, but I haven't done so. For me, this is not about political point scoring, it's about the matter in hand. So as I have said earlier, intent matters as much, if not more, than process, and in these circumstances, I believe the former outweighs the latter, and I will vote confidence.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. I would have been supporting the motion of no confidence if it had been put here today. So that means that I definitely will be voting against the government's amendment and the government's motion of confidence. How can you have confidence in somebody who leaks official documents, thereby undermining best practice and the standards of public office? Ceann Comhairle, there's a predictable row at 2 o'clock today over the order of business, and the move to the convention centre should also have been invited. And as I said in the Dáil chamber, there was no reason why the government couldn't have put forward their motion to be taken tomorrow when we'd already be here, and therefore we could have avoided the cost of actually moving down here in this basis. Ceann Comhairle, I was reading the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform circular entitled Policy on the Use of Private Email and Other Private Messaging Services, which was sent around by HR in April 2019. The circular related to the use of services other than official or active designated modes of communication. It states that it relates to civil servants, but surely the question here is that a Taoiseach and Minister's ability to carry out his official government position to the highest standard must also mean that he is at very least held to the same standards as our government and departmental officials. The circular even allows for exemptions to the rule, but says that information relating to government business must be forwarded to official work accounts prior to being deleted. Point 12 states, failure to adhere to the requirements set out in the circular may result in disciplinary action under the Civil Service Disciplinary Code. Why do Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the Greens think that the Taoiseach and Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment is above the standards we set for our civil servants? We are civil servants, and we should be held accountable for our actions. It appears to me that the Taoiseach actively deleted his account rather than forward the messages to the official account. And as far as I can see from looking at WhatsApp, you have to actively delete an account on that messaging service. You cannot do it by accident, and it doesn't happen automatically either. So the Taoiseach could simply apologise and step down, as the previous Taoiseach, Francis Fitzgerald, did. And there is no excuse for Fianna Fáil and the Green Party TDs to be saying that they have confidence in the Taoiseach. He undermined best practices for standards in public office. This much he has admitted himself. And now he should face the consequences of those actions. If the Taoiseach thinks that welfare cheats cheat us all, what does he think about politicians who behave as if they are above the standards set for others and others in the civil service? Who is cheated then, Ceann Comhairle? Because I would definitely say that the electorate has cheated, as well as cheating those of us, the elected representatives, who try to earn the public's trust in politics.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Now to conclude, Minister Helen McEntee sharing with An Taoiseach.
Comhairle, I want to start by expressing my absolute confidence in Taoiseach Leo Varadkar. Sinn Féin is here tonight, yet again, preaching, once more claiming to apply standards to everyone else in this House, to hold others to account, yet when they are asked to account for their own actions, they fall silent. My colleagues have outlined many instances of hypocrisy, but I want to focus on one again, because Sinn Féin themselves have talked about the challenging year that people have faced due to COVID-19. Yet, in the midst of this pandemic, we saw Sinn Féin pack the streets and a cemetery for a funeral that wasn't even a funeral. It was in fact a political rally organised by Sinn Féin in West Belfast. When asked to account for their actions in their undermining of public health, we faced silence. And yet they needlessly subjected Dáil to this circus. A week after the Taoiseach answered every question put to him, he made himself accountable to this House, unlike those in the opposition benches. Ceann Comhairle, I've worked with the Taoiseach for 8 years. I have seen how he works with other people, with other organisations, with political parties, with colleagues. I have seen how he has worked in difficult situations with challenging problems, trying to ensure that he listens to every single position that is put forward, ensuring that the best outcome is reached for everybody concerned. And I don't think you have to work with him closely to see that. You only have to look at the work that he has done in relation to Brexit. He is an honourable person. He cares about his work. People say that he is ambitious. To be an ambitious public representative, I believe, is to ensure that you get the best possible outcome in everything that you do for the people whom you represent. As Taoiseach, one of his priorities, and he made no secret of this, was to ensure that there was a deal reached for a new GP contract. As a former Minister for Health, as someone who has trained as a GP himself, and someone who saw the benefits not just for patients in this country but for GPs and the wider public, this was his sole motive in sharing this document with the NAGP. He has apologised for how this was done, but he has also answered every question put to him in this House. That is why I think this motion is cynical. That is why this motion is uncalled for, and that is why this motion is a waste of precious time when we could be dealing with issues like COVID-19, like Brexit, or the multiple pieces of legislation and issues that people have elected us to deal with here. This is nothing more than a political stunt, and so I fully support the Government's motion of confidence in Tánaiste Leo Varadkar.
Thank you, Minister. Tánaiste.
Carla, thank you. First of all, I want to thank the Taoiseach, leader of the Green Party, my party colleagues in Fianna Fáil and independent TDs for their words of support tonight. First of all, I want to restate my apology to the House. I'm sorry for my actions that gave rise to tonight's motion, and I accept responsibility for them, and that responsibility alone. While my motivations were sound, the manner in which I conducted myself was not. I do regret it, and I have learned from it. This is the first time that I've faced a motion of no confidence, or even a motion of confidence in my career, and it does force you to reflect on the decisions you made and the things you could have done differently and would do differently in future. Carla, we all know why Sinn Féin put down this motion. Simply, it keeps the story in the public eye for another week. It distracts from other issues they'd rather not talk about. Sinn Féin will defend the indefensible when it involves them, but they will not forgive an error of judgment when it involves anyone else. The truth is, for them, politics is just a game. Every flash of outrage, every passionate speech, every tear choked back is a tactical move. Their spokespeople are articulate, confident, but totally insincere. I think when we make politics a game, we devalue public life and let down the people we are meant to be serving. We're all guilty of it on occasion, but I believe many opposite are guilty of it tonight. Carla, I want to say a few things for the record. The document was the terms of an agreement between government and a representative body. It was not a contract or a collective agreement in the normal sense. Perhaps that doesn't matter, but it is important to state it. Yes, there were multiple changes made between the time of the announcement and publication. However, these were not significant, generally technical in nature, and did not require Cabinet approval. My decision to share the document with the then President of the NAGP had no impact on them. Last Thursday, there was mention of a second document in the Dáil. We've established that that was a 6-page summary attached to it, and I want to clarify that there is no other occasion on which I shared a document with Dr. O'Toole. As I said last week when I spoke to the former President of the NAGP, on the weekend the story broke, we did so on 3 occasions. First, a call from me to him on the Friday night when the headlines appeared online. Second, a call from me to him to try to ascertain the date on which I posted the document for my statement. And a third, contact from him about a statement the former officers of the NAGP were planning to issue. I said I didn't want to direct or advise him, but made some factual observations. I want to confirm that we have not been in contact in the 9 days since. I also want to state categorically that the error in providing the document to Dr. O'Toole, notwithstanding my good reasons, was my own. He is blameless in this regard. He is responsible only of overstating the nature of his relationship with me and the level of his influence, and for sending some messages that were offensive and inappropriate. Having said that, Carla, there are few in this House or across the land who would not be embarrassed about the content of messages they have sent to friends or co-workers, believing them to be private or confidential. Dr. O'Toole is a good person, a good doctor, an effective advocate for general practice and for people and patients, especially during the pandemic, and I hope that can continue. He's also someone who's genuinely committed to providing basic health care to those who need it the most in his charity work: homeless people, members of the travelling community, Roma and migrants, and I know that will continue. Because some people believed he was very close to me, they treated him as a pawn and then made him collateral damage. And that was raw politics at its most cruel. As deputies know by now, there is more to this story than the sharing of a confidential document, and I want to speak about that for the moment. Our democracy is strong, but we're not immune from the corrosive forces being experienced in other established democracies. Fake news, conspiracy theories, the far right, the far left, unregulated fringe publications, and unverified social media. Grievances, score settling and smears, masquerading as journalism, activism, or some sort of anti-corruption crusade. I'd ask deputies in the House to reflect on your engagement with these forces. By giving them your name, by repeating their claims, you give them legitimacy, which diminishes this House. I want to put on the record that many of the claims made about me were trumped up or simply made up. Yesterday's article, for example, was just one example of this. Alleged 10 encounters, many of which simply did not happen and could not have happened, as I was in Brussels on 2 occasions, Barcelona on 1, out of Dublin on another, or demonstrably doing government business. Claim 4 meetings with Minister Donoghue and Mr Harris, which also never happened. All easily and verified and checked if the truth mattered. But truth didn't matter and wasn't the objective. Ceann Comhairle, last week I was asked to give a full and detailed account of my actions to the Dáil and to set out the timelines. I have done so. As I said previously, my guiding principle today is the same as it was when I entered political life: to serve my country to the best of my ability, to make a difference while I have an opportunity, to deal with the issues which affect the very future of our nation, like COVID-19 and Brexit, and also to build a better society for us all post-pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach. That therefore concludes our debate on the motion. The question now is that the motion be agreed to. Is the motion agreed? Agreed. Not agreed. Na teachtaí tar héamh na taisceanna abradís tá, Enya tána gunne abradís níl, Stoilm Gwyn Kestrich, I believe the question is carried. Vote all. Is there designated seats, please? Designated seats, please. Item number 9A, motion regarding confidence in the Taoiseach Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and on that question a division has been challenged. Tellers Thaw, Minister Jack Chambers and Deputy Brendan Griffin, Neil, Deputy Pádraig McLaughlin and Deputy Denise Mitchell. Tá nó go dó Níl Seasca Cúig tá an rún ritse